Welcome to KPMG U.S. News Twitter Space Tech and Government Conversation. I'm Matt Weiss. I'm a director here at KPMG, where I lead our industry communications team and have the good fortune of being joined this afternoon by KPMG's national sector leader for technology, media, and telecommunications, Mark Gibson, and Lorna Stark. She's the national sector leader for KPMG's government practice. And before we get into the conversation with Mark and Lorna to discuss some of the latest trends when it comes to the intersection of technology and government, I just want to remind everybody tuning in today that you can ask questions by tap the microphone button, or you could direct message us at KPMG U.S. News to request to speak. We're going to be stopping during the conversation to address questions. Also, a replay of this conversation will be available. And for those who are in the media, this is intended to be an on-record conversation. So any of what's discussed today can be leveraged in your reporting. And of course, you're encouraged to ask questions. So having said all that, again, sorry for any of the technical issues. I was talking to myself for a good minute or two, I suppose. But having said all that, Mark, you've been a part of several conversations here on Twitter Spaces talking about how technology is a horizontal sector that spans across other industries. But when it comes to government, Mark, it's perhaps a sector that, historically speaking, is overlooked insofar as the average citizen likely associates technology with other sectors such as automotive or perhaps the healthcare sector. But of course, government's yet another sector where the role of technology continues to play an important role. And before we get to Lorna and her talking about what we describe as modern government here at KPMG, just wanted your thoughts, Mark, and your position here at the firm. What stands out to you and what comes to mind when you think about the role technology is playing in government?
Yeah, Matt, thanks for that opportunity and great to be with everyone today. And Lorna, great to be with you. I know Lorna and I had a great chance to be in person last week together at a conference, which felt really good after many, many months working remotely. So really excited to be with everybody today. You know, Matt, I love the opening about considering the role of technology as a horizontal across other sectors, because that really is paramount to what we've been seeing lately. And when I think about the government sector, just the enormity of that, the size and breadth of that, the resources that are associated with that, it really is, I think, a huge opportunity for the technology sector. The government spans so many aspects of what we're seeing in technology. It's one of the biggest consumer-facing organizations. You think about the way the government interacts with all of the citizens and the experience that each of you may have had working with the government, whether it's on a website, whether it's on a phone call, whether it's on a forms. But the need for government to stay current and to modernize the consumer experience, I think, is a really big intersection that technology can play a role. You certainly know the importance of cyber and the risks that are in the world today, the geopolitics around cyber and the government needing to be in a position to respond to that, and the role technology plays there as well. And then, just the enormity of kind of the back office of the government. And, when we think about our advisory practice, what we're talking to our tech companies about, it's a lot about linking the back office and the efficiency and the processing and using technology there, and then linking that all the way through to the front office and the middle office experience that I talked about with consumer. And I think technology has a huge role to play there with the government as well. So it's enormous, Matt. I know Lorna is going to share a lot of the insights today, but it's a huge interface for tech.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Mark. And Lorna, Mark talked about a lot of different topics there, but I want to ask you, Lorna, about that concept of tech for interface. Can we make government websites useful for people, not just for information, but being consumer friendly, essentially? I want your thoughts, Lorna, on that aspect of modern government. I know we did a survey, Lorna, about a year or so ago, where only 38% of U.S. citizens that we surveyed at KPMG said they feel like a valued customer when interacting with government. So it certainly seems like an opportunity for growth and improvement there in the government space.
Yes, absolutely. Technology is key to governments modernizing, and we define modern government here at KPMG as one that is connected, that is powered, and that is trusted. And that powered piece is so important because to us, that means that governments are leveraging today's technology to provide a better service, a more efficient service, a more easy to access service, more equitable access to those services as well. And, Mark mentioned several key things, right? We are all consumers of government. We are all members of the public at large, and we all have to interact with government at some point in time. And wouldn't it be great if we could interact with government in the same way that we shop online or that we interact with other commercial entities and using technology? He also mentioned cyber and the role that government plays in securing data and securing information, especially during these times. We see a lot around the geopolitical space and cyber and government. And then the third thing that Mark mentioned that I want to relate back to is, governments do need to digitize. They do need to become more digital. And that's where this tech for interface comes into play. Technology is the channel and the way that we can access government services in a much better way with a much better client, customer, consumer experience. And in fact, those three areas, customer experience, cybersecurity, and digital government, were three of the top priorities of almost every single state CIO as they provided those priorities to us just a week ago at the NASCIO mid-year conference.
Lorna, you hit on a lot of great points, and Mark did also. I just want to stick with you, Lorna, before we go back to Mark, and talk about that survey that we did at KPMG a little over a year ago, if I recall, Lorna. It was among government executives. It was also among citizens. And if I look back, Lorna, at those findings, 79% of the government executives that we surveyed said that the age of their IT systems negatively were affecting their mission. And when they were asked about kind of how advanced those IT infrastructures are, 41% of respondents said they're working with IT infrastructures that are 10 years old or even more in some cases. When you talk with clients, Lorna, as you're out there and as society begins to open up again, you're spending more time at state capitals and out with clients. Have you seen progress there on the front lines? Are you sensing that there's still real challenges in government with getting up to speed with more modern capabilities to meet the needs of what is an increasingly virtual world, certainly?
Yes, and COVID, the one silver lining, if you will, it was the rapid transition of government services to being fully remote and virtual. And if you had asked anyone, whether it was anyone on the street, if you talked to a government official, elected official, or a consultant like myself, and said, "Hey, could government provide all of its services virtually?" we would have all said no in February of 2020. And fast forward, just another month later, and every government around the world, and especially here in the U.S., was converting very, very quickly to be able to continue providing critical services in a remote fashion. And so now, as we come to hopefully the endemic portion of this pandemic, we are seeing governments looking back at how they so rapidly moved to the remote world, the virtual world, and learning from that and looking to see what is it that we keep doing the way we were doing it during COVID. Where do we need to change policy and regulation to allow us to do these things differently in the way that we've been doing them for the last 2.5 years? And also thinking about how do we best serve our customer with that customer experience, with the customer in mind? Where is that hybrid intersection of the in-person services and the online services? And how do we make both of those experiences the best they can be, the best that they can be in the way that the consumer or the public wants to consume those services?
Great points,
Yeah,
Lorna.
Matt,
Mark, yeah, I'm sure you have some things to add.
Matt, yeah, I think just jumping in on that, when survey the tech sector, talking about the trends, what are the biggest trends they're seeing? It's this digital transformation continues to be at or near the top, and the acceleration of that through the pandemic. It really was a remarkable accomplishment that the tech sector, developed and made possible for sectors like the government and others to move to virtual and to a remote workplace, and technology's role there, I think, is critical. And to see that work for the government, speaking as a citizen and a consumer of government services, I mean, it's certainly positive to hear the progress made there. I also wanted to circle back, if I could, on Lorna's comment about the equality side. And one of the things I certainly believe about the technology sector is that technology is the most rapid way for us to reach equality. It is the most equitable way to solve a lot of the problems that society faces around inequality, and providing the access and the resources to all of our citizens. And so I think tech's role intersects a lot with the government there as well, to make processes efficient and available and services accessible. So not to be lost that there's a big technology play around the equitable delivery of government services as well. So really glad Lorna brought that up as well.
That's a great point. And I just wanted to pause to remind those who are listening that if you have any questions for Mark or Lorna, feel free to tap the microphone button. You can direct message us. I know we had some technical issues at the start of the show, so apologies again for that. But Mark and Lorna, you raised a lot of great points. Mark, I want to come back to a point that you raised about use the word enormity. And I think when folks think about the government in general, that's certainly something people associate. The government's big and expansive. But you were talking about, Mark, of course, in the context of meeting the technology challenges, how expansive government is. You have state and local government, federal government, of course. Are there any other sectors, Mark, that you can think of that are apples to apples, if you will, in terms of the enormity of the challenges? Or do you think government's unique in the scope of challenges it has in integrating technology, just given the multitude of different constituency groups it's trying to reach, and how it operates at a multitude of levels, whether it be at the local level, the state level, or a national level?
Yeah, it's a great point, Matt, because it's different. And that's what, I think the way I'd answer the question is there's nothing like the size and the enormity of the government sector, because it's all connected. It's all interrelated. And while we have, numerous different federal, state, local government organizations of all kinds, they're all interconnected one way or another. And ultimately, it's the same pot of money that's funding all of that government sector. Where what we see when we look at other large sectors that interface with tech, I think about the automotive sector or the banking sector with fintech, we're generally talking about unique commercial enterprise there that are not interconnected. And so there's a lot of going to market against individual customers, which is a different model for the tech sector going to the government. We are seeing a lot of the big tech companies certainly viewing the government as one of the largest markets that they have available when they think about deploying their technology, their solutions, their capabilities. And certainly firms like ours spend a lot of time partnering with those tech companies to go to market and provide services to the government sector. So it really is, I think the word enormous, Matt, it certainly is appropriate.
Lorna, you've spent a number of years, of course, supporting and working with governments. Just welcome your thoughts, certainly, as I know you've been state, federal, all different levels, just on what Mark said.
Yeah, just back to the very opening comment, Matt, that both you and Mark have commented on, is technology as the horizontal and technology as the connector, as Mark just said. That is so true. And if you just take some of those examples one step further, and let's use the automotive industry as an example, the commercial, consumer-driven industry. And if you look at government and the size of government and the mission, as we say, of government, it is an industry of industries. And so at the federal level and at the state and local level, we have transportation departments, turnpike authorities, tollways, and other types of transportation, public transit organizations, so that automotive, transportation, commercial industry has to be connected with the government part of the transportation ecosystem. And when those things are connected by technology, we get so much more out of it. The consumer of the automotive industry is more satisfied with the services they have. And when they have safe roads without potholes and with up-to-date traffic information being shared by the government, then their experience is even that much better. So it really truly is all connected, and technology is that connector.
It's a great point, Lorna. We had Gary Silberg on one of these Twitter Space events talking about the intersection between tech and automotive, and a lot of the points you made, he was making about autonomous driving vehicles, about the car being a computer on wheels and interacting with everything around it. Well, a lot of the things that interact with are government controlled, the stoplights, the highway design system, those types of things. And so it really will be a further connection with tech and the government sector on consumer facing things like that. So I think that's a really astute point.
Yeah, and Mark, it actually makes me think of another thing that's really important about this intersection with government and technology, and again with the automotive industry example, and this connection all around, is that we're not going to go anywhere with autonomous vehicles if governments don't make that possible. Not just from a roadway perspective and having the appropriate lanes and areas where automotive vehicles can operate safely, but from a regulatory side. And so government always has two roles in anything related to technology, and especially a newer technology. They're on the regulatory side and setting regulation. We don't love the fact that governments regulate, but somebody has to govern how we do things and the way we do things. So government always has this dual role with new technology of, what do we do around the regulatory side to make this possible? And then how do we actually use it ourselves to provide the services that government provides in conjunction, again, with this example of the automotive industry.
Lorna and Mark, really great points. And I just want to again remind folks, if you have a question, feel free to ask them. You can hit the microphone button or message us. Lorna and Mark, I want to ask both of you this. I just want to start with you, Lorna, first before we bring Mark in. We talked about the impact, Lorna, the ongoing impact, certainly, of COVID-19 on the government sector, as it has on all entities and all sectors of the economy. I want to talk about, Lorna, the aspect of talent, finding the right talent to work with the technology and to have the skills needed. We put out a paper, Lorna, again, that survey we did of both citizens and government executives, and our report noted that COVID-19 put a spotlight on a lack of much needed technology skills among current government employees. In our survey of the government executives, 45% said that COVID-19 revealed that their workforces were not adequately trained or prepared to work remotely. Only 39% of respondents said that their employees necessary skills to embrace emerging technologies. And a final point that I think speaks to this, Lorna, is nearly 6 in 10 of the government executives that we surveyed said COVID-19 had increased awareness among government leaders of the need to train or upskill agency workers. So you put those three data points together, Lorna, and it certainly highlights, particularly among the government executives that we surveyed, a real recognition of a shortage of individuals who are qualified to work with these emerging technologies. What are your thoughts on that, Lorna? Do you feel there's been progress made over the last 2 years, or do you feel that it continues to be a challenge in the government space to find the right talent to work with the technology?
Absolutely. It is still one of the most significant challenges facing governments today. And in fact, all of us, whether, it's KPMG as a consultancy and professional services firm or anyone in the tech industry, finding resources, especially in the technology industry, with those skill sets, with the, understanding how to use the newest technology today, that is the greatest area of shortage. And, also in the research that we did and the surveys, Matt, there was this other undercurrent of how do you attract new talent with these technology skills if you yourself are not using those technologies in a significant way today. And that really exacerbates the challenge that governments have with technology resources, being able to attract someone away from Google, attract someone away from Meta, attract somebody away from one of these other big organizations that is very, very front forward on technology today, with a government looking for those types of talents and skills, and not being able to compete in the marketplace for those skills. On the equity side, though, I want to bring this back into play. We're seeing some really interesting things in the market around resources and sourcing of talent and skills, and in a way that brings a more equitable access to those types of jobs and skill sets. There are several organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, who have business models now to seek out, recruit, and train individuals from these underserved communities in new technology skills, and then either outsource those resources to people like KPMG or to our clients directly, or even just moving those folks into full-time jobs in any industry, but particularly in government, to fulfill those technology needs from a resource perspective.
Hey, Matt, if I can jump in with a couple of points on talent that I think are really relevant here. The first I would say it's a really good time to be a tech worker with tech skills, and it's not just government; it's across sectors in this horizontal concept of technology. That it's amazing the number of workers with tech skills that we're seeing leave the historical tech sector and go into other sectors because the demand for a government entity or for another sector entity for employees with tech skills has never been higher. But there's also a huge scarcity of those resources. So what comes with that is an enormous cost to recruit and retain people with those tech skills, and an enormous internal cost to try to upskill the workers you have in those skills. But the other point I'm making, it's also, to me, the tech shortage and the talent shortage has also really, really made critical, things like automating the back office, using bots, low code, employing aspects of blockchain technology, where you can't just rely on human beings to be the way you efficiently run your business and process your back office. And the governments, I think, are paramount around that with the labor shortage and the tech talent shortage in the world today, there's got to be other ways to use technology in place of human beings to get done in an efficient way, the way business needs to get done. And I think the government's certainly realizing that as well. And we're seeing a shift there as the government modernizes and employs that technology in the back office.
Great points by both of you. And cognizant of time, I know, believe it or not, we're almost at the half-hour mark, and also cognizant of the fact that individuals join these conversations at different points. So perhaps, Mark and Lorna, it would be good for us just to go back where we began today's conversation about the intersection of tech and government and that concept of modern government and tech being a horizontal. And Mark, if you don't mind just going back to some of the points you raised at the beginning of the conversation, for those who might have missed the opening comments, I think it would be of interest. And of course, Lorna, it'd probably be a benefit for you to also circulate back on the concept of modern government and some of what you're seeing. So Mark, if you could just go first with some of those initial points you made for those who might have joined at a different point of the conversation.
Sure, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity. And really, I think where we started today is talking about technology's role as a horizontal across all sectors in our economy and the government in particular. And really talking about three places where that intersection between technology and government comes to play. The first is sort of the consumer experience. We're all consumers of government services. And we want to have those interactions through technology in the same way we interact with, the way we might go shopping online or something like that. And so technology plays a huge role in the interfaces and the experience we have as consumers of government services. Matt, we also talked a bit about cyber. We haven't gotten too much into that, but certainly the role technology plays to address the cyber risk that the governments face and the data that governments need to protect and the enormity and the severity of the issues if there's a breach there. So certainly a huge link between technology and the government around cyber. And then the last point we talked about was the way governments transform their processes internally, how they connect their back office to the front office using digital transformation, digitizing the way they do business. Some of the comments we made around updating and modernizing technology, which I'm sure Lorna can expand upon, but technology playing a huge role in that modernization effort for government.
And Matt, I want to thank you too for the opportunity to speak with you and with Mark today on this topic, and the opportunity as well to once again talk about modern government and our view of what is a modern government, one that is connected, powered, and trusted. And technology is so critical to each of those components or pillars of modern government. A connected government is using technology to connect internally and externally with its customers and with businesses and with commercial entities. Modern government is powered by that technology that we have today, and technology allows governments to have value, create value much more quickly than it would otherwise. And then lastly, trust. It's so important for governments to regain that trust of the public, and that brings along all the concerns and challenges around cybersecurity and access and identity management, and all of these things come together to help a government be one that is modern.
Well, Mark and Lorna, I really appreciate all the points you've made, and thanks for joining KPMG U.S. News Twitter Spaces. Be sure to stay tuned for more great conversation.